Today at shopdap.com, we're going to be showing you how to buy a salvage title Volkswagen on Copart. Today we're going to be talking about buying a salvage title car. We're going to be looking for specifically a Volkswagen or an Audi model. So we're going to look through a few vehicles to determine, kind of give an idea as to what I would look for when buying a salvage title car. Now, I am not an expert in buying salvage title cars or flipping them. I'm not a body shop guy. My background is in dealership. So originally I was a VW tech. And now eventually I've been out of being a tech for a while. We do obviously a lot of DIY stuff for anybody who's not familiar, and around Volkswagen and Audi stuff, which is what we do for parts. I'm going to be looking for cars that don't have a lot of heavy actual body damage or major structural damage. That reason why is because that's outside of my skill set. So what I'm specifically looking for is something that I think that either I can fairly easily get help, but we can do the majority of the work, partially because we're doing our Project Alltrack video, which if you haven't seen, we will link to, and you can follow along as we rebuild this salvage title car, and we estimate all of the costs associated with it. If you have not seen that, we will make sure that we link that in the description. But that's the kind of the background of what we're doing and looking for a car. So let's talk about the cars we're looking at. We already purchased our vehicle, but what I want to do is go through a bunch of vehicles that are currently listed on the site, look at them, talk about what I see, what I don't see in them that may make me purchase them or stay away from them. So we're going to go through and look at, specifically on our vehicle, we were looking for an all-wheel drive MQB platform vehicle. So if you're not familiar with Volkswagen and Audi, the Mark 7 is the MQB platform, Mark 7 GTI Golf R, Alltrack wagon, Audi A3, S3, TT, TTRS, TTS. But we were specifically looking for an inexpensive car, which almost immediately rules out Golf R. And the reason why, because we were looking for a car that we were going to be able to beat the heck out of and run on tracks, off-road, do other stuff with, and not be worried about blowing up a very expensive car. So that leaves you pretty limited because there's not a lot of all-wheel drive options when you look at these things. So Copart has some stuff, which we did look at GTIs as well, because it wasn't necessarily something we had to have all-wheel drive, but it is something that we would have liked as a nice to have. So let's take a look real quick at some GTI models just so we can talk about them if you were to be somebody looking for a GTI. Now, we didn't sort by location, which you have the option to do through Copart, but is something you probably should consider based on what you're actually going to be doing and to go get the vehicle. Because if you're shipping a car from far away like we did, it can get pretty expensive. So we'll cover all the details on our car in the future, but let's take a look at kind of what's out there. So they list, when you look down the list here, you can see all the cars by year, and then by mileage, and then the damage. So you can look at the impact and see as a front end impact. So let's take a look at this GTI front end impact, because our car did have a front end impact, and you can look at them to see what's up. So as I look at this front end impact, it does appear as though this car doesn't have anything that I would consider to be too scary. It does appear as though there is damage to quite a bit of the car. So the airbags haven't deployed, but the front of the bumper is destroyed, along with the core support is completely ripped out of the car, and there's damage to both the front bumper and the whole front end is pretty much damaged. But it doesn't actually appear as though there's frame rail damage or much, if any, to the vehicle. So you definitely need a hood. Looks like you'd probably need both fenders, and doesn't look like frame rail damage, so you just need like the whole core support and that type of stuff. So this car, as you can see on this side, which I didn't notice, first of all, the axle is completely ripped off, and the side of the car is also damaged, as well as the rear bumper, which we can take a look here and see. So you can see on the side here that the rear bumper is actually damaged, and the whole actually side of the car. So this car I would actually expect, depending on how, let's go back to the details of it. So the value is $17,378 because it's 2015 GTI. This is a non-performance pack car, and it's a manual. So I would expect this car to actually go for pretty cheap. It says they have a buy it now $2,400. I would expect it to go for less than that. So this actually probably will be a pretty good track car, because assuming there's no undercarriage damage, which you can see Oh, it does have secondary undercarriage damage. So this car potentially could be a nightmare. Some people, when they get into a car accident, they don't know enough about cars, so they'll just run the engine on the car until the engine locks up. So no oil just spills out everywhere, and then just keeps running and running and running until it either overheats or locks up, or because of no oil or whatever. So that is something you have to keep in mind whenever you're looking at these cars, is that this car, with all of this major damage up front, which is pretty significant, could even have an engine that doesn't run on top of it. So that's not a good combination when you look at that. So you have to be aware of whether that's the case. Now, they have inspection processes that we didn't take advantage of, but you could do. And I think you may be able to go to these places. I don't know that detail if you can go. So this car would be one that I'd be a little nervous about because of the undercarriage damage, because there's an unknown of if the subframe is damaged, if the engine is damaged, and that type of stuff. So when I look at the front end, which they have a picture of the engine bay here, you can take a look. It doesn't appear as though there's any damage really to the front of the engine. It pretty much just looks like the radiator and all that stuff's blown apart, but the actual engine itself doesn't have damage to the throttle body or the intake manifold that I can see from here. That appears to be immediately obvious. The intake is smashed to pieces and gone, but other than that, I don't think there's any major things there. So it's also something to be aware of that I think is important, that the type of car and the type of damage to the car is probably going to dictate the likelihood that people are going to buy and how much it's going to go for. So for example, a car that's in a collision is going to go for a lot less than a car that just has hail damage. Hail damage cars are going to go for a lot of money because they can get, mostly, at least my understanding of a lot of these cars, is they actually get exported to other countries and resold there as opposed to here. So a hail damage car is basically a perfectly running and driving car, just due to the extent of the hail damage, the car was totaled out. So, and sometimes a lot of the times they have broken windows and things like that. So this would be looking through, determining what's there. I didn't see any burn interior cars when we were looking at them previously, but if you look at a fire car, here's a good example. A fire car, this is the interior of a fire car, and you can see the shell of the car is amazing, but the interior of the car is in rough shape. So the engine is also great, so you can assume this car is perfectly fine, but based on what I'm looking at here, this interior of this car is absolutely positively smoked. Now, if you were to be making a pure race car out of this car, this might not be a bad option, because you can just gut this car, including the dashboard, and just basically hang an interior in there, and then you would be off to the races for minimal cost and having a running and driving engine. You have to keep in mind, some things like immobilizers and key stuff and things like that would be a barrier that you'd have to overcome when you're buying a fire car like this. That's actually not a bad car to buy as a track car, would be a fire car. We didn't actually see any cars like this, although I may have considered buying a car like this had I seen something like that. So let's actually take a look here. Since this is a live auction, we can take a look. And so what you actually have when you go to an auction is you see when the bidding starts, and you're going to take a look, and there's 106 vehicles left. This is auction number, you see 3086, and you can see the one that's currently going right here, 3001. So we have quite a few left before it gets to this vehicle that we're looking at here, and they estimate 83 minutes. I've found that that's roughly an idea of what you're looking at, but it just depends. So what you would do is sit here, wait for this vehicle to come up, and then you can actually proceed with going forward. Let's talk real briefly about how you buy on Copart so you can have a better idea of the specifics of what you would do as a consumer. So Copart is a site that is available to the public, but not every car. The cars vary and have the ability to, for you as an individual who doesn't own a business or isn't reselling or anything of that nature, to bid on cars. You won't be able to bid on all cars, but you will be able to bid on some cars. Also, we want to talk about member fees. There are fees associated with buying a car, so it's important to know there's additional costs significantly above and beyond the actual cost of the purchasing of the vehicle. So there is a multiple costs. So initially you have your buying cost, you have your fees related to the purchase, and then you have your delivery cost if you're not going to be picking up the car yourself. There's also storage fees if they only allow the vehicle to sit on a lot for a very short number of days between the purchase and the actual sending of the money and picking it up. So that's also something to be aware of, so you don't have infinite amounts of time in that process. So if we look at the fees here, you can see kind of they have a schedule here, and the fee A, B, C, D depends on your account with Copart. So anybody can create an account, but not everybody applies to all of them. So fee A is a business member using secure payment. So that's if you're a business, you sign up, you send them your business license information, they approve you, and the items are for resale, and then you have that, which is the lowest fee as far as a percentage of the purchase. Then you go to B, business member using a non-secure payment. Now that's, if you're using a credit card or something of that nature, that's going to be non-secure. And that's including, I believe, PayPal if they accept it, I can't recall. The other one is going to be, secure payments would be a wire. That's what they would accept as a secure payment method. I believe there may be some other ones, but that's predominantly what people are going to be using for that, which is what we use. Then you go to fee C. Fee C is consumer member using secure payment. Again, if you're a regular consumer like you would likely be, and you're using a wire, you're going to be in fee C. And then fee D is going to be a consumer using non-secure payment like a credit card or something of that nature. So as you can see, this goes up exponentially as the cost of the vehicle and can get pretty extensive. So as you scroll down, you can see the more expensive the car gets, the higher your fees get, and eventually you get to a point where it's straight percentage based, and it isn't cheap. So you do want to keep those fees as low as possible. We actually didn't go through on our purchase and go through as a business, mostly because the car wasn't for resale, so we didn't want to have, because we were going to be doing a lot of video around it, have issues with Copart basically saying the items weren't for resale and have some blowback with future purchases with them potentially due to that specific setup. So we actually went through fee C because we stayed as a consumer and had a secure payment method because we used a wire. So this car, you can see, is going to have fender damage, door damage, rear quarter panel damage. The bumper covers are something that I have no problem with, but when you get into things like front and rear doors and a quarter panel, I would probably not want to mess with it. This car actually would be something I might consider buying, and here's the main reason why, is because this car, I could replace a door on the passenger side, both front and rear doors, and it doesn't look like there's a lot of pillar damage of any kind, so the underlying structures of the doors are probably okay, including where the strikers are and everything. And so if that's the case, you could buy this car and repair it fairly easily, even for someone like me who isn't going to be interested in doing a lot of body work. This car would be something that could easily be purchased and fixed by someone like us, especially for a track thing that you're just replacing. You wouldn't even need to replace this rear quarter most likely. You could just put a new door on the front and rear and be done with it in that way. So this car wouldn't be a bad idea, but you can see the driver's side airbag is blown. And when you look at the cost of this car, the current bid is $3,050 because 2015, 21,000 miles. To me, that seems probably higher than I would expect it to go for. I would also suggest what I did when I went through this is what you do is go through live bidding on cars. So what you're going to do is look at a car, wait for the specific date of when it's going to go for auction, and then you can watch it on the live bidding and see what it actually goes for to get an idea of what the cars actually are going to go for that you're looking at. Before you go crazy and get into a bidding war or something, you should know kind of roughly what cars are going to go for so you don't go over the top. So they will show you sale dates of vehicles whenever they're ready or when they're actually going to go to auction, and so you can watch it. So you will have to have an account to make bids though. All right, now that we went through a couple GTIs, I want to talk about some Golf. So because we were looking for an all-wheel drive car, you can search within Golf. These sites are not that in-depth when it comes to models. So Golf and Golf R and Golf Sport Wagons are all going to be under the same header, which is Golf. So that includes Alltracks and things like that. Because we were looking for a Golf, an all-wheel drive one, you can actually sort by drivetrain. So if we scroll down here and go to drivetrain, we can go to click all-wheel drive. So this is going to show us all the all-wheel drive Golf models that are out there. So you can see there are Alltracks, there's a couple Sport Wagons. If it was up to me, I probably would have purchased a Golf Sport Wagon, mostly for the fact that I think that there's going to be some stripped out S model all-wheel drive wagons that could have been an option for us. That's going to determine a damage and a bunch of other variables, but I think that would be the one that would have been the best option for us. It just didn't work out that way, so we ended up with an Alltrack, which I think isn't always the best because they end up having a higher value. For our purpose, it was not necessary to have an Alltrack, but it was something that we ended up with. So you can take a look here. There is a Golf Sport that they have listed, this Sport Wagon S. So this is a perfect example of a car that I think would be a good option for us. This actually probably would have been a great car for us to buy. And had we been patient and waited a long time, we could have selected a car like this, because you look at the estimated retail value, because it's a Sport Wagon S model and it's a strippo car with cloth interior and a manual. This is not a high resale value car. Now, if it's all-wheel drive, and a 1.8T, it still is the same essential effect for us. So this car is going to go for a lot less than our Alltrack actually went for, which would have been a great option. So you can take a look here. $12,798 is the retail value. I would expect this car to go for much, much less money, and you could absolutely get this car, I would expect, for, I would say, $3,500, $3,000, something along those lines. Should run and drive. I assume it does run and drive. And it was rear-ended with some front-end damage as well. So you can take a look. The grille is damaged. Looks like the hood probably closes, I would guess, based on what I'm looking at here. It may not. It may be bent in some way. And then if we look at the rear, the car was hit in the rear, but not extensively. It doesn't look like it's actually damaged the body. It's just the tailgate that's damaged. So this car actually probably would have been a dream for us had we known about it and it had been up for sale when we were buying a car, because you could just replace this tailgate, replace the glass in the rear on that new tailgate and all that stuff that would have to be swapped anyway, the tail lights, the whole deal, blah, 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 rear bumper, that type of stuff, and this car would be ready to roll. So the downside of this car obviously is the fact that it is not a particularly expensive vehicle, and so depending on what you're doing with the car, you might not want to buy this to fix, but you could buy it as a car to track kind of, or do something along the lines that we're doing. So it is an all-wheel drive car. I've seen some of these cars that actually have different information. We had somebody who was comment on one of our threads talk about our project car that ended up was not designated as an all-wheel drive car. It was actually front-wheel drive, but it was all-wheel drive. So that would be good news for that car, because it was misdesignated and it would probably go for a lot less money than it would, but it also can work against you if this car, for example, maybe happens to be a front-wheel drive car, but they designate it as all-wheel drive by mistake. I don't know what the recourse would be in that situation, but I certainly wouldn't want to be in that situation. Okay, now let's look at some Golf Rs just for context, because I think Golf R would be the car that a lot of people would want to buy in this circumstance. So this is a flood car. This is a Golf R flood car. We can tell, which you can look at it and see immediately. First of all, there's damage to the car. Second of all, it's got the wrong wheels on it. So we know somebody probably swapped out. They probably had aftermarket wheels and swapped back after to take the wheels back off the car. So when we look at the car, buying a flood car I would not recommend for most people, because they may not be prepared for the gremlins that are associated with it. You know, you can see clearly there's an airbag error. So you have an airbag light on this car. So buying a car like this, if you're not really familiar with cars, you should not buy flood cars. I do not recommend it. It's something that could bite you in the rear end and could end up creating a lot of headaches for you. But you can see when you look at that Golf R, it looks okay, and overall it's actually not a bad car, although it does have fender damage. But you could get a fender replaced and get it painted for pretty inexpensive. The bumper is also damaged, so that would be an additional cost. They show estimated retail value is $31,950. It hasn't even gone to auction yet. You can see the sale date is February 21st at 3 p.m. That's when the auction that's going to be a part of is starting. So you'd have to be prepared for that to go at that point to it. But it's already at $5,000 almost, and that's before it's even gone to auction. So that's going to go up exponentially. From what I've seen, most Golf Rs, even ones that should be not super valuable, are going to end up in the over $10,000 range. Which is why we didn't go with a car like a Golf R, because we can accomplish the same thing with an Alltrack that we are going to do with an R for significantly less. So let's take a look here. This car runs and drives, front end collision, and then biohazard chemical. So biohazard chemical. Biohazard, from my understanding of biohazard, it means that there was potentially somebody got hurt in this car, and that's why they have that biohazard marker from like blood cleanup or something of that nature. I can't say why, but we can look at the interior of this car and I can tell these windows have been open for some time. There's leaves inside this car. This car doesn't have any damage that stands out to me. It looks like somebody lived in the car. The wheels do not appear, they look like Pretorias, but I'm not sure that offset is right for Pretorias, so they could be knockoffs of some kind. I'm not 100% sure based on what I'm looking at here, but it's hard to say exactly what the damage to this car is, so that would be something that if you were in the area, you'd probably want to investigate further. This car would be something maybe you could fix and make it nice, depending on what the damage is. It does run and drive. Just because it runs and drives, that doesn't mean that there could be differential damage underneath the car that you have no idea about when you get this, and it drives, but it just whines like crazy because it has no fluid in it, and if you drove it long distance, it would just lock up eventually. So things like this, you have no way to know, and it could have damage enough to where it will drive, but it's not something you would want to drive at any speed because the thing will eat itself if you do. So these type of cars, this is a car that has a lot of question marks around it, and I wouldn't blindly purchase a car like that because it's going to go for a bunch of money. It's already at $5,900. It hasn't even gone to auction yet. It's going to auction on the 25th, and there's a lot of unknowns around that. To me, side collisions are the scariest because they can collapse the pillars of it and compromise the structure of the vehicle, which I personally have no expertise in or interest in trying to fix a car that's been completely smashed to pieces. So let's take a look at this one, because this one looks like it's pretty smashed up pretty good. It's in the snow, you can see. And this car actually isn't too scary. It is salvage title, needs hoods, fenders. This car it looks a lot worse than our car did when we bought it, although I'm not sure it's actually that much worse because it doesn't have, no, it does have some engine damage. So for sure this engine, the intake manifold at least got blasted. So there's a bunch of this piping. So there's a bunch of things that it could have taken out in the interim. So you would certainly have a lot of unknowns and surprises potentially. And the worst case scenario in a car like this that you buy is the car is smashed and it broke off like an ear of the engine block to where it can't be mounted properly. And now you have to replace the engine due to actual physical damage to the mounting point of the engine. That's the biggest thing that always would be a red flag for me with a car like this, that there's actual pieces of the engine that got damaged that require replacement of the engine, which engines on new cars are very expensive. So you do not want to have to do that, and you're not going to find a heavy used market for engines and stuff like that. Thank you so much for watching our video on buying a Copart vehicle for Volkswagen and Audis. If you like this video, be sure to give a thumbs up and subscribe for more like it. And for more of our project Alltrack that we bought from Copart, be sure to check out the link in the description to those videos.